The button has been hit. It is that time again. It's episode number 4 of COVID Talk. I just want to give a really, really quick shout out to people that have been listening. As I'm sure you've realised by now, I have jumped on the bandwagon and I've started a podcast just like everyone else out in the world. But look, the response has been amazing. So if you're listening, if you're sharing, thank you. You know, today's a great example of why did I even bother to make a podcast? And whether I consider my time in the sciences or if I consider my time in music, there's been a few people that I've come across that have really helped me navigate my life, navigate the industries that I'm in. And this guy is the perfect example of that. So when it comes to work ethic, this guy's unparalleled. He has played some of the biggest stages in the world. He's got massive records. Today, I get to introduce you to Mr. Gareth Emery. So mate, it's been a while. How are you doing?
Very good. I don't know how I'm going to follow up that introduction, but thank you.
Go on. What part of it wasn't true then, eh?
No, I'm just not. I think like many people in the music industry who've achieved things, I've never been very comfortable with my own achievements. So when they read back to me in a list like that, I'm always like, oh no, I don't know. Which is probably why I've had some, to be honest. But we won't get too deep into the psychoanalysis 10 seconds in. But thank you. I'll start again. Lovely intro. Great to be here. I'm awesome.
You know what, that you couldn't have started on a better note because you're just so grounded when it comes to it. With everything that you've done, I think you never forget to wake up every morning and just give it 100%. And today's a great example. I know that you're in the middle of another album, you're moving house, you've got the kids running around. That's kind of what I mean. So like, how are you handling the juggle right now? How's it going in the life of Gareth Emery?
I mean, it's always a balance, right? And for a long time, I kind of struggled to make sense of work-life balance, particularly after I had kids. Before I had kids, I didn't have to think about it too much because it was just 100% work, like 99% work and 1% partying and going crazy. But there was no need for balance. And when I had kids, I was like, well, shit, like I can't be staying up until like 7 a.m. working anymore because like I would just spend no time with them. So I started thinking a lot about how to balance my life at that point, and I guess I realised it is just a balance. You know, the fact that it's a balance means there is no perfection. You're never going to be perfect at work or perfect as a family man or like as a husband or whatever, and you just like try and balance them as best as you can, right? So is there stuff is there great stuff my kids have done that I've missed because I've been working, because I've been on tour? Absolutely. On the other hand, have I also turned down like some really awesome work opportunities and missed out on various tours because it was important for me to spend my family? Absolutely. So you just have I have many of these decisions to make, and I try and make them as kind of best as possible. But it's always a balance.
Yeah, I can imagine, and you know, it's going to be a balance for me doing this podcast because there's so much that I want to dive into. I don't even know where to start, and I think in many respects, this is kind of like a selfish one because this is like my little way of kind of packing away a lot of lessons and a lot of stories of yours kind of for reference and for a lot of people out there because, you know, you came up in the scene, if I'm getting this right, from Southampton. You know, yeah. You're out Southampton, and run me through it. You're in your bedroom making music. At some point you go to Manchester. At some point you end up in LA. So what happened with your journey?
So I was always into music, right? So I played the piano from the age of like 4. We just had one in the house. Nobody else really played it. Weren't a musical family, so to speak. But there was a random old antique piano and I would just like fuck around on it basically. So that's how I started out. And then like for most of my upbringing, like it was bands was my thing, right? Like, so, you know, the Britpop era, it was like Oasis and Blur and Shed 7 and stuff like that. And my ambition for most of my life up to the age of 18 was to be in a band, and I was in like a bunch of bands and stuff at college. That was like, was my thing. Discovered electronic music when I went to university. And then for a few years, I kind of juggled them both. So I did electronic music on one hand and bands on the other. And for me, it was like, wherever I get the record deal first, that's where I'm going. Right. I love both sides. I loved being in the band. I loved making music on the computer. And
did you have the haircut for the band side of things?
Nah, I was always like the other people in my band looked more, they were like Mancunians, right? So they looked more legit, whereas I was like this like southern townie wearing like a Ben Sherman shirt who looked somewhat out of place in like a northern sort of indie band. But like I was good enough at the music side to get away with it. But yeah, like I was doing them both, and I was like, whichever one kicks off first, that's the direction I'm going to go in. And it just happened. Just got my first record deal in electronic music, and once that happened,
well, I mean, I've got to try and jump in there because, as you know, a lot of people who are kind of listening to my stuff, we're a lot of musos, you know, a lot of people in the industry, and people typically compress that little area. You say, you know, I just got a record deal. Like, how did that happen for you? How does someone just get a record deal in that position? Yeah,
I'm probably oversimplifying 5 years of work into into one sentence. Yeah, so when I first started making electronic music, like, it fucking sucked, right? So I had one little keyboard called a Yamaha DJX, because at that point, to make electronic music, the studios cost an absolute fortune. It was all hardware. You couldn't do it on computer like you can do now. So, like, yeah, it was like 15 or 20 grand for a studio, and I just didn't have that cash. So I was making it on this crappy keyboard, but I was like sending out demos to labels. Because the other thing was, and this is back in like 99, 2000, you couldn't email a demo. You had to send them on CDs. The record labels, at least in dance music, it was like an impenetrable wall. Like, they didn't have email addresses on their releases. They didn't have phone numbers. So you literally would just send off your CDs in jiffy bags into the ether, and typically you'd hear nothing back. So every few months I'd get a new batch of demos. I would send off 3 or 4 tracks in jiffy bags to all my favourite record labels. None of them would ever reply. And I carried on doing that for a couple of years. Despite plenty of people going, yeah, anybody replied to you yet? No, maybe it's not for you. You know, stuff that we all probably experience on the way up.
But for you, when you were, you know, packing away those CDs in the jiffy bags, sending them out, you said 2 years go by, no one's picking up the phone, no one's getting in touch with you.
Yeah.
There must have been some, I don't know, perseverance or insanity, whatever you want to call it. You know, you must have had family and friends at you saying, like, you know, why do you keep pursuing this when you're obviously not getting the feedback you want? What do you think it is about your mentality, even back then? Why did you keep sending out the jiffy bags? Why did you keep doing that?
I mean, the thing was, at that age, you know, I was in my early 20s. I didn't think about failure. Like, for me, it which is weird, right? Because, like, now I'm a little bit more, I consider the downside, and I think about, like, how you can hedge a situation. But at 20, I think, honestly, I just didn't, like, failure was never an option. In my mind, the record deal was going to happen, and I always thought it was going to be with this batch of jiffy bags. And then as no response came, it would be the next batch of jiffy bags, because I knew the music was getting better. And I could see that every time I sent a new batch of demos, the music was, like, 50% better than the last time. So I was always like, all right, like, I've improved 50%, now we're going to be there. It just turned out there was much more improvement needed than I realised. And that's one lesson I often tell people, right? And like, these days, it's actually pretty easy to get your music heard. And when I talk to young producers, particularly electronic music, and they're like, how do I get a record deal? I'm like, make something that's good enough. Because for the most part, record labels these days are pretty decent at listening to music, much better than they were like 20 years ago. If you're sending stuff out, people are listening to it. So if you're not getting a deal, it's because your stuff just is not good enough. And that's fine. So because you've got to go back and work on your craft and continue to work on it. So, and then I think one thing that did help, I remember maybe a year or so in, I got a phone call, and it was a bloke who ran a record label in London. And it's like, oh, I get this bloke, I remember very well, this bloke called Nils Hess. Now, to me, growing up in Southampton, London was like the epitome of cool. And anybody that sounded like they were from London was like way cooler than us, like, you know, farmery sort of Hampshire lot. And this bloke was, oh, Gareth, Nils Hess here from Undercover Music Group in London. He goes, I've listened to your demos. And I was thinking, it's the deal, it's happening. And he goes, yeah, and none of them are right for us, if I'm honest. None of them are really that great. He goes, but I see potential. And he goes, and I'm going to send you some music. He goes, I want you to listen to it. He goes, I want you to absorb it, take it on board. He goes, and then you'll see the sort of stuff that's going to get you a deal. So he sent me about 15 compilation CDs, which was amazing. And
what was his name again?
Nils Hess, he was called. He was
Nils Hess.
Nils Hess. He was a German guy originally, But he was living in London. He's like he's kind of a techno guy. He's probably still around in some form. And that was the first positive feedback I ever received from the industry. So once I had my phone call from Nils Hess, I was like, okay, it's going to happen at some point. And it didn't happen with him, but I was on my way. Then I ended up kind of going what would have been today the SoundCloud route, the independent route. And I was like, you know what? I'm not really getting any luck here with what I'm sending out. So I'm just going to fucking press some records up myself. So again, like, to get records to DJs in 2001, you had to press them onto vinyl. So I begged money from my parents, and I had some money from like the job I was in. I was doing a day job, and it would cost like, I don't know, like £1,000 or whatever to go and press up like 500 vinyls. So I did that with one of my records, and I sent them out to DJs. And I was like, you know what, like, fuck the record labels. If nobody's interested, I'm just going to go direct to the DJs. And they were actually much easier to speak to than the record labels, which I also think is a lesson.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes if you're trying to go down a certain path for years and every door just getting slammed in your face, go and think where there's an alternative path. Because the DJs, they had emails on their website. So I could send them a record, and then I could chase them up and go, yo, have you listened to it? Like, what do you think? And these were like the biggest DJs in the world. They were much easier to contact. So I sent out...
It's really, it's actually really poignant there, like that, because there's two things I almost want to unpack. I mean, the first thing, I was talking recently with a guy called Endor. I don't know if you know him. He's the guy who did that Pump It Up remix.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
kicking off right now. He's a really, really fucking class dude, and he's really grounded guy. And he, you know what? He did exactly the same thing. He was sending it out to kind of DJs and stuff, and he got picked up, got a few spins, and then the momentum started. Yeah. And it's funny how those two stories have crossed my path just like a couple of weeks away. But also that the thing about the guy picking up the phone, I mean, that's something that all of us listening, it's like, isn't it mad how that tiniest bit of encouragement can completely change the route of someone's life? Like, it can make such a huge difference. So if you're listening out there, go and encourage something if you like it. It's a big one.
Oh no, massively. And I try and do it whenever I get the chance, especially if it's somebody who I don't think is getting much encouragement. So, if somebody's blowing up on SoundCloud, they don't really need an additional comment from me. But when it's like some kid who's trying to make music and I can see the potential's there, but he hasn't quite got it yet, somebody who I feel is not getting encouragement from anybody else, those will be the people who I'll like drop a message to and try and help on. But yeah, man, Nils Hess, he definitely helped me out. And, so I went the DJ route. The DJs all started playing my music, and that was really helpful because before I knew it, I remember a track was played on Radio 1 from an Essential Mix live from Mardi Gras. I think from anybody from the UK, this was definitely the case back then. I think it's probably still the case now. First Radio 1 play is really a sign that things are happening for you. Doesn't matter if it's the middle of the fucking night. Like, that first Radio 1 play, that's like, I think your friends and family are going to be impressed by that. And it kind of went from there. Then once I was getting DJs playing my stuff, once I was on Radio 1, then the record labels took attention. And that is still something that happens today. Record labels are not necessarily there to develop artists. They're not usually there to see the untapped potential and go, yeah, you're 70% of the way there, let's get you to 100%. They want to see you when you're like 99%, and it's already fucking happening, and they see that you're going from 99% to like 200% with or without them, and they just jump on that the rise. That's usually how it seems to happen.
How do you feel about that dynamic? Because, the first person who came on the podcast, someone called Corinne Campbell, and really champions amazing stuff when it comes to independent releases, looking at all the tools we have nowadays. Obviously, like, we're talking about an era in time where the kind of tools and functionality that we have now just didn't exist. So it was a different dynamic. But what's your impression? How do you feel about what's happening with labels now, and the fact that they're not developing? Because some people have different schools of thought that labels should be helping to develop artists and kind of hold their hands through it, and other people, and I think I sit in this group, it's like, if people want to do music and they've got the passion for it, then you need to see who's got, like, I suppose, their own initiative to just crack on and do it. Because did you feel like you were kind of being let down by the industry, or did you see it as a good way to kind of prove yourself and get focused and really knuckle down on your craft.
Yeah, I've never seen it as being like a letdown thing. Like, yeah, if we're talking sort of pie in the sky, how would we like the world to be? Which I don't think is a very helpful place to spend my time, to be honest, which I don't...
Exactly.
But it's like, if we were, yeah, it would be great if record labels spotted talent and developed artists. And I think particularly right now, right, like a lot of the artists that labels are picking up are very, very good at the marketing and social media game, maybe not so good about the music. And perhaps if labels were more proactively developing artists, there are artists that will not have made it in today's cutthroat climate of social media and digital marketing that we may have wanted to hear. However, there's absolutely no point, me, you, or anybody listening, sitting there going, oh, what a shame that the major labels or whoever are not doing their part in artist development. I think a lot of independent labels, by the way, are much better at this than the majors tend to be. The majors will jump on when something is already a sure thing. The independents can be a bit better at it. But no, I never saw it as like letting me down. I saw it as this is the landscape and I need to find out what my particular strengths are to make the most of the landscape that we're in. And I think that's what everybody needs to do, right? Figure out what you do well and work out how to, sort of deploy your abilities the best.
So we're going to go back to the story of your development, but just quickly on that note, what do you think are your strengths and what do you think are your weaknesses in your game, out of interest?
My strengths is I think there's a few, right? Like, because I look at both musical and kind of on the marketing business side, but they're both very important. Musically, I have a good ear for melody, and I can never explain the one thing I can't explain is how to write a melody, because it's something I never had to learn. It was just an innate thing. I can write melodies, pretty decent melodies, without a lot of thought. And, stuff like putting a set of chords around a vocal, I feel like I have a pretty instinctive grasp of what is going to make a vocal sound good and like what to place around it, which is usually simple. I think a lot of people overcomplicate that stuff. So I think that is a strength. And then on the marketing side, I've usually been good at crafting a coherent message about who I am and what I stand for and essentially what the artistic project is about. And that's really important as well, right? I think people need to be able to get on board with, it's not just liking the music. People want to be invested in the artist.
It's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, and I've been good over the years, and it has changed over the years. It's different to what it was 10 years ago, but I've been able to create a project that people wanted to passionately support. On the disadvantages, I'm not that great a producer, which is weird because I've produced... Well, no, I'm not that great an engineer. And in dance music, engineering is very, very important. And for me, spending like 6 hours like tuning a hi-hat or a kick drum, just kills me. And I don't have a passion for it. And for a long time, I would insist on doing 100% of the process myself, which meant spending a lot of time in bits of the process I wasn't very good at. And then about like 3-4 years ago, I was like, you know what? This is just not, engineering is just not my strength. I've written all the music, like I've done the production, I've written the chords, I've done the riff and stuff. Let's bring in somebody else who's because they can often do in a day what would take me 2 weeks. So so that's a bit of a weakness. And I guess my only other weakness, and maybe this is not a weakness, but you can tell me, like I try and be as authentic as possible all the time. Like, I like to write my own social media.
That's not a weakness.
Okay.
That's a cop-out. That's a cop-out on a weakness.
No, but like, it definitely leads you to not having as big a career as you could do. Like, there's no doubt that if you're willing to sell out at every step... So, for instance, like, I would never post, like, just stupid example, never wanted to post memes on my social media, right? For me, it was like my artistic project, my voice. I don't want to post stupid memes, regardless of how many likes and followers it might ultimately get me. And... there are people in making dance music who've built up like far bigger followers than me by like posting memes. And but for me, regardless of like how much success it might get me, that was never like a route I wanted to take. And there's been like a lot of things where I've been like, you know what, if I wanted to cut that corner, if I wanted to make that sacrifice, there probably would have been more success, but only in terms of like financial success, not any of the success that I really valued. So yeah,
it probably comes down to your roots, Gaz. You're just like, look, I didn't send off 10,000 Jiffy bags to just start posting memes on my pages. So you get to the stage then where so you're in Manchester at this point then, and you've had the call and you get signed, and this seems to be sort of 2-3 years. How does it feel when you get signed? What's the dynamic that changes as an, at the time, you know, young producer, young artist, you just signed the deal? Walk me through the emotion, walk me through what happens when you get signed.
Well, yeah, so I was paid, I think, an advance of £500, which was good advance, to be honest, and I think for one single dance music record still would be quite a decent advance these days. And the biggest difference was, when the record was promoted, it was coming from a trusted source. Whereas before, it was like me sending out records with like labels that I'd printed myself, which was stuck on by me and my family in the living room in front of Coronation Street. So, nice. Yeah, when it was coming from... And this is the other thing. A lot, at least in dance music, and the same goes for like journalists and stuff, us artists have trusted sources of good music. There are some record labels who send me music, and there are some people that send me music, and I know it's always going to be good. There are other people who send me music, and I know it's usually going to be shit. And if you know it's going to be shit, you do tune out after a while, and you kind of stop listening. So it's another bit of advice, like, don't hit the same label every fucking week with new stuff. Like, if it's a no, go back and wait 6 months and get a load better and make sure it's sufficiently different, because otherwise people will just stop listening to what you're sending, and then you may make something good, and then it becomes hard to get it heard. Anyway, the fact that I signed to a label meant the records then were being sent out with credentials. The fact they weren't coming from me, they were coming from a legit label that everybody had heard of, just meant that when the records were arriving at DJs, it was like, oh, wow, more 5 a.m. This stuff's usually good, as opposed to like records from some kid. Honestly, there was no, and this is not a good thing, but like there was no celebration on my side. There was no like I've done a deal. There was no like, whoa, let's go out and get drunk. It was just the natural next step in the process, and I was on to the next fucking thing. And like for large portions of my career, like particularly when good things have happened, there's been no celebration. Whether it was like selling my first like 5,000 tickets or my first iTunes #1 album, it was like bang, done, on to the next. That's not a good way to be, and I wouldn't recommend it. Now I try and slow down and celebrate, but back then it's how it was.
I kind of like it though. I really vibe with that for one main reason, because whenever you have those moments of real achievement, it seems that you have never like rested on your laurels. It's like there's so many people in that moment that would have got that 500 quid advance. They would have been popping the champagne, they would have been out, they would have been, I mean, I don't know what you're going to buy for 500 quid, but you know what I mean. It's like the classic story, isn't it? It's like, we've got signed, we've made it. And from all the experience that I've had with all the people that are in my networks, and you're obviously such a testament to that too, is like the day you get signed, it's like that's when the work starts. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily something to be like, yeah, brilliant, we've now got this engine behind us that's going to take us forward. It's like, no, that's almost like you're starting. That's day one. So I think that obviously I hear what you're saying with that ethos that you do have to take the breath. You do have to take the few minutes. You have to have the meditation. You have to sit and be appreciative of the things that you have achieved. But there's no point really, is there, in celebrating for the fact that you're just beginning the next step off another considered journey, and that seems to be how you've lived your life so far. No,
I wouldn't have taken a week holiday, even with hindsight. What I probably would have done though, in all honesty, and this is what I would recommend, I would have liked to have just sat down when I did that first deal and just sat in the garden or whatever and just looked out and remembered back that like 3 or 4 years ago, it was the 10,000 Jiffy bags, and, how far I'd had to come to get to that point, and go, well fucking done. Look at where we've come from. Look at where we are. And even just like a 10 or 15 minute little moment of introspection was would have been, I think, a good thing to do. And I very much do that now when we have like even small wins. But yeah, that took me in like a good 15 years to start doing that. And even like, you know, when I released my first artist album, and it was immediately an iTunes #1 in 15 or 20 different countries, which was an amazing achievement for me to have. We were still an independent artist at that point. But I had so much going on around there. Like I was going on tour the next day, and we were working on like the remix album, and you know, I was buying a house at the same time. And it was literally, oh, we got #1, amazing. Posted on social media. Yeah, we've posted on Facebook. Okay, brilliant. And like that, literally, it was like a 1 minute thing in the office. And I guess now looking back, I wish I'd enjoyed those moments a bit more. But like you say, you don't want to be that guy or girl who had one bit of success and have kind of lived on it since then. And the music industry, as we know, is full of them. The people that got that one deal, they got that one gig, they had that one moment, and they will spend the rest of their fucking lives talking about it. And that's probably not where you want to end up.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be so many people listening, maybe even outside of music, that are going to know exactly what that feels like. Some of the biggest moments in our lives these days seem to just go like a blink. They're never quite what we expect them to be, because we're always imagining what it's going to be in the future, and then we kind of skip through that little bit of present, and then we're remembering something that's past gone. And you know, you mentioned that there are some forms of mantra now that you have. Like you're a meditator. You someone who's kind of considers this stuff now more in where you're at now.
Yeah, I meditate pretty much every day for 20 minutes, and I've tried various forms of mindfulness, and actually, for anybody that's getting into it now, I wouldn't recommend meditation as the starter, because it's tricky and it's not always satisfying. What got me into it was a routine called priming. It's by a guy called Tony Robbins, very famous.
Yeah, I know the guy, yeah.
Yeah, probably the most famous kind of self-development sort of coach guru. And he has a routine called priming. And it's a 15-minute thing. You'll be able to find a guide on YouTube. And it's what he does to get himself in kind of a peak state to attack the day. And that's what I did for the first 2 years. Very, very effective. And then I kind of switched over to like a more formal meditation practice, which I do it every day, pretty much every day, 20 minutes. And amongst other things, it makes you much better at being able to slow down and appreciate those moments. And actually, probably the biggest benefit, it's allowed me to be present during shows. Because, and I think I said
that's a big one. That's a huge one, man.
Yeah, and I think I said this to you when you had your first. It was I think it was the first 1,000 capacity you'd done, maybe.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think we were talking just after I'd done Islington Assembly Hall. So that was my first like 1,000 cap room in London.
And I think I said to you before, and I think you said, do you have any advice for doing these big shows? And I was like, don't expect to enjoy it too much. If you do, that's going to be amazing. But for me, for years of playing big shows, especially big festivals, I didn't really enjoy the sets. You know, because before it's nerves and it's build up, you're getting your music ready. I'm trying to think about production. Then you're getting on stage and I'm just hoping everything works. You've got 20,000 people out there. Is the equipment working? Is the production working? Has the smoke go off on time? Are our lasers working? Everything in my head is kind of like this very fast real-time problem solving to provide the best possible experience for the crowd in front. And then usually there'd be about 3 minutes at the end where I was like, oh wow, we've pulled this off. This is fucking amazing. They've had a great time.
Nothing went wrong, yeah.
There's 20,000 people, they're going crazy. And then bang, it's over. The next artist comes and I'm off, and the celebration, and then I'd kind of like celebrate. And it was only really with meditation that allowed me much earlier in the sets to get like, I'd get 10 minutes in and I could stop my mind from like constantly worrying and look out and go, wow, there are 20,000 people out there. Enjoy it, breathe. I'm only going to experience this once, and that goes for any show. I will never experience that show again, regardless of whether it's good or shit, big or small. It's a one-time experience. Look out, remember it, breathe it in, absorb it, and feel grateful for it. And meditation was what allowed me to do that.
You'd be happy to know that very show, when I was backstage, and I'm not making this up either. Like, since we spoke, I'm trying to remember when that was. It was in LA sometime last year, but I actually did. I took 10 minutes. I put on some just chill music, sat, meditated, processed it. I thought through the fact that I'd got to that milestone. I could feel the energy of the room across the other side of the stage, and I did. I really, really did. I really just zoned down, really took that time to appreciate it. And I have you to thank for that. And it's just a massive lesson, because I know what I'm like, and I would have done exactly the same thing. I would have been speaking to the tour manager. Are the confetti cannons, wide yet? Did we fix the problem with the LEDs on the sun strips? Are our monitors working okay? Has the mix changed? Have we launched? That's me all over. And I think that it was a massive lesson for me to take that, and I'm glad that you kind of took the time and going through that story for people listening. It is vital, because we do have this tendency, especially with the social media, especially with those who are listening, who are in the independent music scene. Your plate's full. You're always walking around with this plate with things falling off and shit going wrong. And if you're not careful, you kind of just miss stuff.
And you would have been rushed on stage, right? It would have been like right up to the last minute, confetti mix. Oh, there's people on the guest list that can't get in. You're like, oh, for fuck! I've literally been there. Like get them in. So true. Moments before going on stage. Are you in? Are you in? No, we're still outside the door. Get these fucking people in. Time to get on stage. And what it also does is, though, if you plan to take that time, you make sure shit is working just a little bit earlier. And it's so nice. I'm so glad you did that, right? It's fucking important. It's just so nice to go like, you know what? I have done everything I can. I've worked on this show sometimes for 6 months. So much work has been done over the last 6 months to get to that point. And like on our Laserface shows, we'd have a crew of, sort of 25, 30 people working on those shows. All are highly competent. And I have to go to myself, there's only so much you can do. You can take these 10 minutes. You've got a really fucking great team. Everything's taken care of. Take the 10 minutes and enjoy the show. And I think learning that early is going to be a great thing for you. Because also, when something does go wrong, it's much nicer when you've had that little moment and like chilled out. You deal with it much better than when it kind of like takes you by surprise. And things will always go wrong in live shows. It's kind of a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely, there's so much I want to touch on with the Laserface stuff and things that you're doing when it comes to that level of production. But we're gonna rewind really slightly and carry on with the story, because you're in Manchester. You've been signed now. You know the work's kind of begun. DJs are starting to play your record. At what point and why did you kind of uproot and take the journey to Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean, Manchester was also like, I grew up in Southampton. I moved to Manchester because it's where my wife was from, where her family were, and I love Manchester. It became my adopted home. And actually, my time in Manchester was when things had kind of taken off when I was living in Southampton, but I'd not cracked the UK. And usually, if you're from the UK is the hardest place to crack. And there was a period. There's a period when I was beginning to get great recognition overseas, but in the UK, nobody really gave a shit. It's always harder in your own country, especially for us Brits. And in Manchester, I started running this is a running theme in my career. I was getting great shows everywhere, but not in the UK. And then when I moved to Manchester, we started doing shows at a nightclub there. Really great nightclub. And I kind of realised if other people weren't going to give me good bookings, I'll start my own fucking night. So I started my own night.
Rock and roll. Yeah. That's what we want to hear.
I just did it myself, right? And I was lucky that we moved there at the right time. I had an office in the same building as this legendary nightclub called Sankey's was. And I was booking like the likes of Above and Beyond, but I was the support act. And because it was my show, I could kind of make sure I had that prime slot, and I could kind of take a few of their fans over to my side, and that was kind of how I cracked the UK. So eventually after that, then people started recognizing me as like having some fans and being a legitimate act, and then I started getting other good UK bookings as well, and so those shows kind of had done what they were supposed to. I think in terms of moving to LA, around 2010, 2011, America really got dance music. And up until that point, the US was not particularly big for electronic music, which is bizarre because it was invented here in sort of Detroit and Chicago. This is where it all started. But for most of my career, wasn't that big a thing. And I used to go to LA in like 2005, 2006, and I would play to like 30 people. None of them knew who I was. None of them gave a shit. And it was kind of like, yeah, I like going to LA because it's a fun place and it's sunny, but the gigs are fucking shit. And I remember in 2010, I played a festival here in the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. It's a 100,000 seater stadium, Electric Daisy Carnival, which is now in Las Vegas. And just seeing a 100,000 person festival, I was like, shit, the Americans are suddenly getting electronic music. And in America, when they do things, they do tend to do it pretty big. And once America had caught the like electronic music bug, it was very clear that things were going to go bonkers, not just because of the American tendency of going big, but also just this big country, right? You know, nearly over 250 million people, lot of big cities. And for a few years, I was doing so much touring in America. I would fly to the States twice a month, fly out on a Thursday, play shows Thursday, Friday, Saturday, fly back Sunday, get back to Manchester Monday morning, have like 2 days to open letters and maybe make a few tunes, then back out to the States. And in those years, I was like one of, I think, BA's like top like 300 flyers worldwide. So I was literally just always flying to and from the States. And I was like, you know what? I really enjoy being there. I'm going there crazy amount to play shows anyway. Why not move there? And Kat, who is now my wife, was my girlfriend at the time, she was up for giving it a crack. And we said, let's go do 6 months and see how it goes. So we rented a house in LA for 6 months. And 7 years later, we're still here.
What a journey.
Yeah, it's been fun. And then now we have like 2 American kids and stuff, so we're like, you know, somewhat kind of like locked in. But
they're 2 of my favourite people. They are the cutest kids, aren't they? They're such sweethearts.
They're awesome,
absolute legends. And you know, when especially people in music, they're going to be hearing you talk about the plane rides, the nights, the touring around the world. They're just going to be so enamored by it. I mean, anyone would be like. But what was it like when you were going through that process? Because it feels like something that, as much as it sounds and is incredible, that must have taken its toll as well. That must have been tricky.
No, it was brutal. And in those years, like once I moved to the States, the travel just became a lot easier because all of a sudden 70% of my gigs were in America and I could take internal flights. And even if I do a gig in New York, you know, I'll go and play New York on a Saturday night, leave New York at, say, 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. It's a 6-hour flight, but then you get 3 hours back. So I'm back in Los Angeles at home with the kids at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which is amazing. So the travel is very, very easy when you're just touring the United States. Those years where I was going from the UK to the US every single week were just insane. I mean, because I was also like, I was drinking, I was like, which I don't do a lot of these days, but I was like drinking, I was partying, like. And again, that for me, I wish I'd taken the time and gone, man, like you're living the fucking dream. I was also a complete workaholic. Like I was literally working 24/7. I was drinking, I was partying, I was playing 13, 14 shows a month. And that was like good 3 years of my life. And those years just went by in a flash. Lost, and it wasn't all positive, right? There was a lot of amazing shows and a lot of amazing work-based achievements, but I turned into a bit of a dick, as I think anybody that, even though I'd been in the industry for a while, the money I was making went fucking crazy. My fame level just dramatically accelerated, and I think anybody that gets a lot of money or fame overnight probably turns into a bit of a dickhead and starts believing their own hype for a while, and that certainly happened to me. And you know, I didn't see my dad very often. I lost contact with like my old school friends and stuff, and it was only really when I came up for air like 3 or 4 years later I was like, shit man, I'm trying to like reconnect with the real world a little bit.
I just love the honesty. I think that's one of the things I find fascinating about you. You're just like, yeah, I turned into a dick, you know, you made a ton of money, and you know, and fucking hell, who wouldn't? It's like you become some super famous rock star DJ flying around the world. God knows what people are trying to shove up your nose 24/7. It's like that. It's like I can see it, but like when
I didn't normally need people shoving for me, but like we'll say.
But like it's you just learn so much from it, though. Do you know what I mean? And it's like when you were down that road, like for those of us who aren't going to experience what it's like to do that dizzying heights thing, is there any way of unpacking like why you became a dickhead? Like what was it about it that made you feel like you became that, and what was it like? It's a weird question, I know, but like could you try it? Like,
no, I definitely can, because I've been writing like a book of sorts about some of these years, just so I wanted to like document them and not forget them. So I've kind of unpacked a lot of this stuff in writing the sort of draft for that book. Like honestly, a lot of it, I didn't have gratitude, right? I did not have an appreciation for the situation I was in. For me, it was like bigger, better. I want bigger gigs. I want better fucking flights on the plane. That's kind of, and when you're always looking for more, that can go to a dark place. But I'll tell you how it happened and how it started, because I remember it pretty clearly. I was off doing a festival in Poland, and a lot of big DJs were on the festival, and I was feeling pretty good. My career was taking off. I was excited to play the show. I was making it. And at the airport, I'm there like standing in line for security in economy, and then all of a sudden, like, I see like Pete Tong, Sasha, Sven Varf, all these big old school DJs just breeze past me straight down the business class lane. And
motherfuckers.
Yeah.
What absolute arseholes to do something like that to you.
Yeah, and like I think at that point, like I wasn't like, oh, I'm still lucky to be doing this gig. I was like, they've got that, I want that. Yeah. And then like I get on the plane and they're all sat comfortably in business class, and they're all, I remember getting on the plane and they're all there, and it may not have been those exact DJs, but it was like a bunch of like big old school DJs were playing this festival. And they're all there chatting business and stuff. So I walk on the plane, I'm just hearing these tantalising, so he was doing a deal at Universal, and he said send, and I was like, oh, I want this. This is where I want to be. And they're like, move along, sir, move along. So they're there supping champagne and eating peanuts and having these great conversations, these like titans of the industry. And down I go to the back of the plane to be sandwiched in a middle fucking seat. Like right at the back. So, of course, at that point, I'm like, I want to be in business class. This is what I want now. And when your aspirations become about material things, that's when you can become a dick. So I made a bit more money, and about 9 months later, I was able to start flying business class, and which was amazing. It's much more expensive than economy, but I was very determined. I was going to earn the money, so I no longer had to fly economy. But on my initial business class flights, and this is where the reality can disconnect from your visualization, I'd imagine myself strolling in with Pete Tong and Sasha and sort of being one of the gang. In reality, though, I didn't look like I should have been flying business class, because like I was still in a Ben Sherman shirt with a fucking backpack. So what would happen is I get to the front of the line and it's like, excuse me, sir, this is the business class lane. The economy class lane is over there. So okay. I was like, oh shit, well this was rubbish. I've got all the money to do it, but now it's shit because like people just don't think I belong. So then I'm like, right, I need to get some clothes that look suitable in business class. So I stopped shopping at like River Island and Topshop. They'd serve me well. No idea why I abandoned them. Served me well since I was 15. And then I'm like, right, I'm going to Harvey Nicks, because like I was making money at that point. So I'd walk in a Harvey Nicks and buy stupid sunglasses and stupid jeans and stupid jackets. So then I could rock up to the business class lane like dressed in all this expensive shit. And I think you just see the path, and then I just continue down that path, right? And even though my art was still important to me, I had a desire to be in business class, to be wearing like expensive shit, to be seen as like making it. And I don't even know who to, like probably people I didn't even fucking know. Like I wanted to be in business class looking like a fucking rock star or whatever. And that kind of spread to other areas of my professional life, right? So I guess I started believing the hype about myself. I started thinking I was this great fucking DJ or whatever. So when there was like a billing issue where I couldn't get top bill on the flyer, I would like kick off about it and go like, give me top bill. or I'll cancel the fucking show. And this is actually pretty standard behaviour in electronic music. It's horrendous. I can say it's horrendous now because I don't generally try and indulge these sort of games, but at the time there was so much money in electronic music, these sort of excesses were quite normal. And like there you'd hear stories about like, you know, these like superstar DJs, be it Swedish House Mafia or whoever, like cancelling a gig because the wrong car had been sent to pick them up. It was supposed to be a Cadillac Escalade and somebody sent like a BMW X5. This was the level of excess there was in electronic music at that point, and just got swept along with it in all honesty. And
it's weird to hear you talk about it because it's just so not you. Like
yeah.
I cannot imagine you being like that. I can't imagine. I just can't see it. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting to hear about that journey and like what do you remember? So you kind of gone through that process of falling into it, and do you remember the climb out of it?
Oh yeah, very clearly. I mean, I think what happened was, and this was a big change for me. I did a residency deal. Well, I think the first thing, becoming a parent is a massive change. That's going to change everybody in many ways, usually for the better. And it definitely did for me. I also did a residency deal in Las Vegas that kind of went to shit. And it was like 2015. And I left the club I'd been playing at for years and years and went to this new one that had opened. And they paid me a lot of money. But their casino really struggled. And the shows were always pretty crap, right? Like I'd gone from playing to thousands every week at the best club in Las Vegas to 50 or 100, still getting paid great money, but I was doing these gigs that were pretty crap. And that really showed me that money was not the most important thing. I was like, here I am, making the highest nightly wages I've ever made, but doing something extremely dissatisfying, because the gigs were not good. And I was thinking, would I rather this, or would I rather go and play for £500 to, you know, a packed, sweaty house in Manchester? I'd want the packed, sweaty house in Manchester. So that was how I began to kind of reconnect with reality in like a professional sense, realizing there was much more to it than money, and I just kind of got swept up in it. And I think in terms of like material possessions, most people never get. The sad thing is this: if everybody in the world got to be really fucking rich for one point of their lives, we would have a lot less materialism, because we have this narrative that this stuff makes you happy, whether it's like a big TV or a big house or like fucking fancy cars or whatever. And when I was making crazy money, I made sure I tested every one of those assumptions. I had a fucking Lamborghini, Rolls Royce, like fucking expensive watches and shit. And
just gotta check.
Yeah.
Just gotta see.
Just gotta, yeah, no, I was like swept up in it. And honestly, don't make you fucking happy. And I had to do that to learn. I don't even have a car now. I've not had a car for 2 years. I just take Ubers and borrow my wife's, and I'm more happy than when I had a fucking stupid Rolls Royce out in the drive. So I think a lot of it
I've got a question, right? Do you think that people can hear a story like that and take it for what it's worth, and it can change their opinion, or do you think that this is something that people fundamentally have to learn on their own? Is this? Do you know what I mean by that?
I think it can go both ways. I think if I'd heard my story, I'm not saying I wouldn't have indulged in some excesses. I probably wouldn't have carried on thinking it was going to deliver positive change. I probably would have stopped after the Lamborghini. You know, because that was something I'd wanted since I was 15. I did it. It didn't really make me very happy. That probably would have been the end of it for me. But because I'd never really had this lesson explained, or I'd never looked for it, I went nuts for quite a bit longer. But, you know, it's nice to come out the other side with some level of, I don't want to use the word enlightenment because it far overstates the journey, but I think people can kind of see it at any level, right? Like, I never had like my own private jet, for instance, but I can tell you right now, it would not make me any happier than I currently am. And
well, that's a huge thing, because, you know, as an artist, there's lots of people watching. I've felt the same. I've been through similar stuff. You know, you're always out there thinking, you know, how cool is it going to be when you get to play the O2 and you're flying around in private jets and you've got like gold on your arm, and it's just like, yeah, I'm lucky. I think I haven't been tempted too badly by that whole process, but I feel everything you say. I really feel it. I just love the honesty as well, and I hope people listening can like just get in that mindset of what it must have been like for Gareth Emery, you know, Southampton boy, all of a sudden just like balling in a roller in the middle of Los Angeles on a fucking house overlooking the city. So like
it was like, honestly, like if you were in dance music and you were a big act between 2008 and like 2014, it was almost like being a lottery winner, because you weren't really changing what you were doing, but you could make in one night what you would have made in a year 5 years previously. So all of us, it just went nuts, and you hadn't really changed that much. Just the demand went bonkers. And yeah, I think but I think anybody can look at their own lives and they can kind of say, like, you know, say you remember when you upgraded like a shit car to a good car. How much happiness did the good car bring you? Was it fairly fleeting? Like, was it like amazing when you got it, then you just got used to it, lasted a few weeks? Probably. Doesn't matter how high up the chain you get, it's still a fairly fleeting thing. And honestly, the things that do deliver happiness and fulfillment, pretty much the same now as they were when I fucking started writing good music, like good times in nice interactions with other people. Yeah, having a great crowd in front of you, playing the music you've made to a crowd that appreciates it, absolutely, that is a wonderful gift, and is as much of a gift now as it was now 10 years ago. But material stuff, and by the way, there's honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I'm not saying don't enjoy your money, don't go out and buy fancy stuff. I don't have a car, but I will still buy some cool shit every now and again. Not like cars and clothes, but like I've nothing against people spending their money. It would be hugely hypocritical, and that stuff can be cool, but don't think it is going to bring you happiness. You need to find happiness and fulfillment in other areas of your life, and once you've done that, have a bit of fun with your money. Yeah, fucking cool.
Well, I remember you unpacking this idea, this concept. I think this is something you must have been through a few times, because you've got quite a solidified ideology on it. It's like every time that those things come into play, when the money comes into play, when the drugs come into play, and the traveling comes into play, it's like all of a sudden you're very quickly, even if it might be, you know, a couple of nights a week when you're going out as opposed to working on music or something that you're enjoying, or connecting with people in a session, it's like you went through that process of thinking like, well, what is the iterative effect of having many, many weeks now where we're like off the grid, like hungover? Like, how does that impact the music you're making? How does that impact your career? And it's interesting that you've kind of got yourself quite set in how you feel about that, you know?
Yeah, massively. And like the more success you have, the more things that will come into your life that drag your time away from what should be your core business of being in the studio and making tunes or writing songs, whatever your core business is. So, you know,
but like, I suppose it's interesting because it's obviously the core business as well as your like emotional well-being, because like you say, you know, when you're in the studio and you're working towards something, you're creating music, it's a struggle, but there's a challenge, there's a process involved of accomplishment. And I think that's where and I mean, look, I'm speaking for you, but like it must be for you as it is for me. It's like you have a real grounding of happiness and fulfillment in that basic stuff. That's why you're in music. So you start becoming distracted, right?
No, and I take that so seriously. I log all my hours spent making music to make sure I'm doing enough, because there are periods, large amounts of time when like say life was like flights, hotels, gigs, interviews, and before you know it, months go by and you've not written a note of music. That's just the world you end up living in. And I will log in an app called Tally every 30-minute block I spend writing music. And I don't try and do a huge, like, I don't go for like, I'm not trying to do like 10-hour days. For me, my target is 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, just 10 hours spent on music. And then often that will lead to much more. But as long as I do that, I'll make good music. I'll keep myself sort of grounded. And just logging it means I don't have to guess. and I can't kid myself and go, yeah, I spent some studio time last month. It's laid out clearly in front of me. There's my target for the year, and there's where I'm at.
Is that something that you would recommend for younger musicians, artists, that they... I actually think that what you've just said there is huge, by the way, because I don't do this, but like that's another like little bombshell of advice for me that I really think is important, because I can't tell you how many times I jump in the studio, I'm sitting at the keys, and I have a little bit of a period where something's not quite gelling. I'm on Instagram. The next minute, like half an hour's gone, maybe an hour's gone, and it's just like... You think, okay, well, maybe that was just one day, but then the second day might be the same, and the third and the fourth, and maybe 6 months goes past, and you've just like hacked your chances of success in half because you weren't applying the time where it needed to be.
Well, I think there's two facets to that. And I've thought about this stuff a lot, and I've had to in order to continue making music in a social media world, which is not always easy. I think the first is that consistency is much more important than kind of intensity. So give me 2 hours every day as opposed to like one crazy 16-hour session, because research has shown most of us only get 2 or 3 hours a day when we're capable of our best work. After that, there's kind of a diminishing return, and that's certainly the case with me. First 2 or 3 hours in the studio, I'm pretty good. Then after that, I start to lose some perspective in terms of what I'm hearing. I start to zone out a bit. So for me, I just try and maximize that first bit, and then I'm done for the day. Secondly, being able to focus, and like a lot of my albums when I'm in the studio, either the phone is on airplane mode until those 2 hours are done, or I've got like a dumb phone, right? So like an old BlackBerry that doesn't go on the internet. So I have something that if somebody needs me in an emergency, they've got it, but I don't have access to Instagram. I don't have access to any of my normal social media. And we could go down a rabbit hole here. I think on the social media front, safe to say, these technologies are unbelievably addictive. And I think most people listening probably know that. Like if you've experienced them, you know they're addictive. Like they are designed to get you coming back as often as possible and to maximize the length of your visits. That's how these companies make money. And they're remarkably clever at showing you the right things to keep you there. And there's a great podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and it's by a non-profit called the Center for Humane Technology, which kind of like looks into all this stuff. If you're interested in this stuff, it's a really fascinating listen.
You know, I think I've heard this. Are these the guys who basically blew the whistle that they were like strapping up 14-year-old kids to like dopamine measurement machines to see how much they were going to wait for Instagram likes and stuff, to like creepy shit.
Exactly, and and when you realize how the world's best engineers and behavioral scientists are stacking the deck against you to try and stop you from leaving their platforms, then you realize you have to defend yourself. You have to defend your attention. So even when I'm not in like an album run, I have like screen time on my phone. I have pretty strict limits to how, like, again, I'm going to sound fucking crazy, but this is just what works for me. I have a really addictive personality, so like I could easily spend 2 hours on Instagram in a day if I allowed myself. So I have screen time, and I have like a limit of like 15 minutes, I think, on Instagram, and then I need a code, and that code lives on a bit of paper. It's not in my brain, which is inside my phone case. So when I hit my limit, it's like you're blocked out. You need the code to continue. Now, if I'm just fucking around, let's say I'm like looking at, I don't know, like I'm watching your stories, I'm probably not going to go and get the code out to continue watching because it's a hassle taking the phone out of the case. But if I'm doing some valuable work where I do actually need, like, I don't know, I'm posting myself, okay, then I can like break the glass, get the code out and have a bit of emergency access. And that's really helped him out.
Guys, this is what I'm telling you about this man. He's got the answers. He's figured shit out. Everyone listening to this right now is just going to be sitting there going, 15 minutes. They're sitting listening to you admitting to doing 2 hours on Instagram, being like, I fucking do that. Times 10.
Of course.
Take 5 hours on Instagram on a weekend.
Yeah, of course we do. And like, my phone is very boring because, and often like, I might wake up after, and when I go to bed for the night, my phone is in a different room, but like, I might wake up after, let's say I have a nap, my phone's on the bedside table, and I pick it up, And like I think a lot of people these days like being on their phone in bed, and I used to like that very much too. On mine, there is literally nothing to do. I'll pick it up. Instagram's locked out. I haven't got Facebook on it. I haven't got Twitter on it. Any place I like to waste time on the internet is also blocked to like some sort of limit a day. Often, all I can do is load my Amazon Kindle app and read a bit of a book. Like, that is literally all I can do, which I'll do for like 5 minutes, and then I'll get up and get on with my day. And that's the difference. Like, I'm fine like with doing stuff like reading a book on my phone, because that book is not developed to keep me there as long as possible. I'll just give one example, by the way, of how this stuff works, because I think it is interesting. So on YouTube, obviously everything you do is tracked by the algorithm, right? How long you spend watching a video, when you pause, when you play, what recommendations you follow. And YouTube, when you're on YouTube, literally builds up a little virtual Markovic in YouTube system, which acts the same way you do. They take all your behaviors and they literally build up a virtual version of you, because they know how you act, and the virtual version acts pretty fucking accurately like you, because they've got, hundreds of hours of your behavior to base it on. And then what they do is they take that virtual version of you and they show it 10,000 videos and see which ones it turns off on and which ones it keeps watching on. And basically, whichever video is most and obviously because it's virtual, this can happen in a split second, and whichever video is most likely to keep the virtual version of you watching, the little like Markovic that they made in their servers, that's the one the real Markovic is seeing next.
Mate, I've done similar reading, and it's so good to talk about this stuff, because one of the things that's strange is, for so many people listening, just would never think that someone would go to that level to manipulate you, would you? You would never think that the greatest minds in the world, the best engineers, the best software designers, we're talking like 12-dimensional arrays of behavior measuring. It's the level of scrutiny when it comes to manipulating people nowadays is shocking. And I mean, it must feel weird, especially when you've got kids on the iPads with the programs measuring what they're doing. It must be strange now as a dad as well. No, like my kids are a little bit young to really get hooked too much into the algorithm, but like, it is crazy that some of the best scientists in the world, they're not launching rockets or trying to find a cure for cancer. They're working out the best how to stop you from closing Instagram. How to shove ads in your face. That's exactly it. Yeah.
We have to remember, this is not social media of 2006, 2007, when it was like about connecting friends. These are like multi-billion-dollar businesses, some of the biggest businesses in the fucking world. And because they're all free, the way they make money is via advertising, and they've got very, very good at it. And again, something like the Center for Humane Technology podcast, they go a lot into, is it right? How would some sort of regulation look like? And to me,
well, do you think it might be like what we saw with like smoking? You know
yeah,
what I mean?
I personally do, actually. Yeah, I would say in 15, 20 years' time, the way we sold and bartered with the attention of the human race in an almost unregulated way will be seen like the way smoking will be seen like smoking. And, it's clear when you look out in the world, we've got a fucking problem. You walk to a restaurant, everyone's on their phones, like people come out for dinner together and they're just there looking at their phones, not talking. Every time I drive my car, people just wander into the road, just cross the road, and they're looking at their phone and nearly get knocked over. Like, it's blindingly fucking obvious if you put the thing down for a second and look out in the world. Like, they've got us hooked on this. There is a real problem. And yeah, I think at some point it will be like smoking. But I don't try and get too heavily into the debate. Is it right? I mean, I do believe it's a little bit wrong, but I'm not there to have a debate. I'm not there to try and convince people. What I am there to do is defend my own time. Because I'll tell you what, if you can work out how to minimize your time on these incredibly addictive devices, you have an advantage immediately over about 95% of people, because 95% of the world are hopelessly addicted on the fucking dopamine pellet dispenser, and they don't even know it. They're not even questioning it. So the moment you just move into that 5% that even questions it and goes, yeah, maybe I do want to reduce the amount of time I spend on that stuff, you've immediately got an amazing competitive advantage. And when it comes to making it in the music business or any other tough business, you take every fucking advantage that you can.
Man, I genuinely feel inspired. I'm going to get the apps. I'm going to get the screen time thing. I'm done. Instagram's going. But
No,
this is exactly... Sorry, go, mate.
Yeah, the challenge for you and for me is also like, obviously in a professional sense, we need to use these things. We need to be good at it. So it's a trade-off. And you go, how can I still do the good job I need on social media to grow as an artist, whilst also saving enough time for my art? Because right now, most of the music business, most artists are too much on social media. And I think that affects the art badly. And you can probably spend, I can spend less time on Instagram than most people because I have a team that helps with social media posts. But honestly, even if you've got nobody else helping you, like talking to up and coming artists, you should be able to get your shit done and get out there in about 30 minutes.
Yeah, there's something really fascinating on that note. Just as you were talking, I thought when it comes to artists and our obsession with getting across social media and making sure we've got our visibility, there's this interesting shift what's happening right now, and I'll try my best to explain it because it's not really that solid in my mind. But recently I came across this song. A lot of people are going to know it. It's a song called This City by Sam Fisher. It's just a fucking amazing song. And it's funny how this guy, whoever he is, because I hadn't heard of him 2 weeks prior, he made a bit of art that was so great. The first thing I wanted to do was get on a mic and do a little cover of it and chuck it to my, however many thousand followers out there.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is the machine for propagating great information has never been more oiled. So it's almost like I realized in that moment, fuck going on TikTok and Instagram and Snap and Twitter and Facebook and constantly trying to garner the attention. It's if you make something that's great, that's really, really great, then people like me and you and everyone else out there in the world are going to want to celebrate that, and we're going to perpetuate that great bit of art like wildfire. And this bloke, God knows, it's hundreds of millions of streams within weeks. And it's just, that you're so right. We forget that it's not always about everyone look at me, everyone look at me. It's no, just get the thing amazing and then let the machine do its job. Yeah,
exactly. And I think if you're 85% making the art great and 15% working out how you get that art out on social media, that's a pretty good place to be. Like you say, though, you look at a lot of artists and they're I meet artists who are they're up and comers, no real careers of note, and they're spending almost no time on their music because they're I've got my website, I've got my Snapchat, I've got to maintain Twitter, all my fucking political retweets and stuff. I've got my Instagram, I'm making all these TikToks, and I'm if the fundamental product was better, you would not need to do all this stuff. Like you say, the system will just do the work for it, and it's why most of my time goes into trying to make the product great, knowing that when the product's great, a lot of the other stuff kind of takes care of itself.
Well, this is you're almost it almost in a way feels like a personal attack, because not because you are, but because as you're talking, I'm just yeah, that's me. I'm absolutely up to my neck in so many different other jobs. I've got a company on the side. I've got the label. We're fucking doing everything, and it's just you forget. It's good. It's genuinely good for me to be having this conversation again. It's the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to exercise for an hour. I'm going to get these apps on, and I'm going to smash it.
No, but I think your product is great as well as you know. But I'm not. By the way, I'm not prescribing the formula that works for me should work for everybody else. A lot of people, you got obviously a great side hustle in your other business. And I'm never one to say that it's the wrong thing to do or whatever. What I do think, have the information and be conscious. So you in particular, I would never tell you how to divide up your life. That's a personal decision. What I would tell you is you should know how long you are spending on stuff. And you should know how long you're spending on music versus how long you're spending on the label versus how long you're spending on other stuff. Because I've had periods where like life just takes over, and I've also like, I don't run a record label anymore for this exact reason. It took too much time away from my own artistic stuff. But if you have the numbers, you can go, right, I spend 30% of time on my own music, my own artistic project. I spend 30% of time on the label, 40% of time on my other business. And if those percentages equal roughly how you would like your life to be, cool, no changes needed. But once you have the information, if you suddenly go, shit, like I'm spending only 5% of time on my own musical project, but that happens to be the number one aspiration, then you make adjustments. So just have the information known. You only get that by tracking.
Well, it's a really handy tool. You mentioned one already, but also for people listening, funny enough, since we last spoke, I did do exactly that, and I do that actually now. And I actually use a platform called Toggle. Yeah. And Toggle's really simple. It's just a free thing online. Anyone can access it. You go on a browser, you put the different things in, and that's it. You hit a timer and it keeps track. So I really have adopted a lot of that kind of mentality that you gave me with that stuff. And you are so right, because it allows you to start making decisions based on actual information, because we all know we're not great at remembering what we've applied to what. We just aren't. We're humans. And I think that this is again such a big thing. For example, when we look at your journey as we've gone through, Southampton, Manchester, LA, things start blowing up, you've got the labels, you've got moving, then you come and you create this thing called Laserface. Yeah. You go, right, and then it was like level up again. And I mean, I know that we're really starting to go through eating up time now, and I do just want to dive into this, because this is such a huge thing, and I was moved when I started to see the things that you were putting out on Instagram. And remind, because the handle was just at Gareth Emery, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, if you're listening, pick up your phone, go at Gareth Emery, and just look at the Laserface stuff. This is, I don't even know where to begin. How do you even get that many lasers, people? That kind of production is just next level. And this is testament to how you must be dividing your time, how you must be focusing, because to get even that alone done must be a huge undertaking for you and your team.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate in that I'd put on like a lot of big shows in the past, never as big as they got with Laserface, but I was familiar with the rudimentals of promoting a show, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd been doing that for, probably 7 or 8 years in terms, because obviously when I play a nightclub, it's easy. A promoter goes, here's the money, you come and play. It's all their equipment. Very, very simple. When it's doing what we call hard ticket shows, like your Islington Assembly Hall or somewhere, that's obviously a very different scenario where you're getting a venue and you have to bring in everything. But I already knew how to do that. Laserface I was kind of fortunate in that my tour manager at the time happened to be this absolute genius laser programmer, and he wasn't really doing it anywhere other than his YouTube. And he showed me some videos he put on YouTube, and he'd done these amazingly choreographed laser shows, and I was like, why are we not doing these live? And he goes, well, he said, nobody does time-coded lasers live. And I was like, well, why not? Because lasers for me up to that point have been pretty shit. Like there'd like be like some like rainbow pattern, and they'd always get turned on at the wrong time. I actually wasn't that much of a fan. And when I saw what he could do with lasers, I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. Why can't we do it live? And he said, well, you'd need to run a time code and you'd need like a server. And I was like, well, yeah, that all sounds like things that we should be able to do. And once we realised the technology looked like it should work, I hired a venue in New York, an amazing venue called Terminal 5. It's about 30,000 capacity. And I said, right, we're going to do a show. We're going to call it Laserface. We're going to announce it in a month, and you got 4 months to figure it out. And I said, I've really pretty much a blank check. Like I said, we'll whatever money we need to support putting this production together. And so
people think you were completely crazy when you decided that you were going to try and do something like that.
Yeah, 100%. And even the name Garcia, who's my partner in it, hated. He was like, oh, it's really cheesy. And I was like, listen, like what I've learned on doing these shows, it needs to be like, if you're from the UK, you'll know what this means. It needs to be Ron Seal. It does what it says on the tin.
I love that.
Yeah, because like I've done shows in the past, but like I struggled to summarize in like one line what the shows were about. I'd be like, yeah, I'm doing some live acoustic stuff, and we've got great laser, and we've got great light, and it's like a 6-hour set, and that just meant that nobody really knew what it was. Laserface, lasers in your face. You know, and we have our kind of successor to Laserface is called The Lasers. It's very, very clear what you're going to get on both of those shows. And so we had a great brand. I had a good team of people. Garcia was a genius laser programmer. So he would take my music and would spend weeks choreographing these laser shows in advance. And it just meant for a degree of coordination in these lasers like had never been seen at dance music shows. And the thing just became a ticket selling machine. Like for our second show, we did still my biggest solo show, did 8,500 people in the Bill Graham Auditorium, which is in San Francisco. But we did like a 15,000 person festival. We regularly would do like 5,000-6,000 shows, and it was just an amazing experience. But it was, again, I saw potential in somebody very, very talented, and was able to bring that potential into a brand that had wide-ranging appeal.
I mean, it is just huge, and when I look at it, and you just think about the sheer scale of what you're doing, I cannot wait to see it, one day live. And as you're balancing that, and as you're balancing your move, and you're building a studio, and you've got the family in the house, like you're now just going into another album release, which is literally just on the horizon at this point, isn't it? So when you're dropping, it's next month, right?
Yeah, it comes out in a month, and like the only thing that's kind of allowed me to juggle like a lot of stuff, and this is something I learned from a good friend of mine who I've known for a long time, is Mark Gillespie, who is well known in the music industry. He's the manager of Calvin Harris, the only manager Calvin Harris has ever had. Discovered Calvin on MySpace back in 2004 or something like that, and I've known Mark since even before he found Calvin. He used to be a nightclub promoter who managed Calvin Harris, turned Calvin into this juggernaut, ended up in business with Jay-Z in Los Angeles. Really interesting dude. And whenever I spent time with him, I just noticed he didn't think about anything small. He was only ever doing the biggest shit. And to the extent that I used to think he was a bit of a bullshitter, because like you'd go for lunch with him and he goes like, yeah, I'm starting my own record label with Sony, I'm becoming an artist myself, I've got a band, I'm founding a music festival which is going to be in Winchester. And I'd be thinking, this guy, he used to hand out flyers like 2 years ago. Well, but it'd always have these crazy ideas, and like in those crazy ideas, like, oh, and I found this kid on MySpace called Calvin Harris, he's going to be a massive star. And I can't do it quite to the extent that Mark Gillespie does, but that guy spends absolutely zero time on anything that isn't these audacious, massive ideas. And probably 90% of them don't come off. But the 10% that do come off, because everything he's going for is audacious, massive ideas, have given him this incredible career. And what it showed me is I don't spend a lot of time. There's a lot of things I don't do, right? Like I'm very difficult to contact. It's very hard to get hold of my email address or my phone number unless I know you otherwise. Not because I want to be a dick or I think I'm too good to contact people. I just have very little time, and it's important for me to spend the few hours I have a day that I can spend not making music, doing the most exciting stuff, be it the album launches, the Laserface, writing a book or whatever. And I'm just really careful with my time, and I try and spend my time doing the biggest, most exciting, most interesting things I can kind of get my hands on, and that's the only reason why I've been able to kind of have a succession of pretty fun projects.
Well, mate, you know what? That's probably such a great note to round up on, because I feel so fortunate that I know that you are so busy right now. I know that it was tricky to slot this in, and I'm very conscious of taking too much of your time. But look, I hope that for people out there listening today, have learned and absorbed as much as I have. Like Gaz, honestly, all the time you spent with me, the time we've worked in the studio, seeing your work ethic, seeing what you're doing, it's just awesome. It's very, very inspiring, and I'm wishing you all the best of luck for the upcoming album release, for the new tours. It's exciting to watch the ride. So look, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Amazing, man, and thank you. And honestly, one thing I always try and find time for is spreading the lessons I've learned. If I can save people if I can save people time by not making the same mistakes I did, that's kind of my way of giving back, I guess. Before I go, 2 recommendations, by the way, which I wish I'd known a lot earlier. As we've already discussed, the information you put in your head on a daily basis is very, very powerful. So you can choose to wake up and read the Sun Showbiz column or Daily Mail or TMZ or whatever. As we've already discussed, those are probably not things that are going to help you get ahead in music. 2 blogs I absolutely love, and you can read these on an app called Feedly. One is called Gabe the Bass Player. He writes pretty much a daily blog about the music industry. And one is Seth Godin's blog, Sethgodin. These are 2 things I read every day. And both of them talk about the art of creation, making great art, making it better. And try and start every day, to your listeners, listening to something that makes you want to go and make something fucking great. Put the right fuel in, and you'll probably get the right result. That's my last recommendation. These are amazing blogs, and I think they've done a lot for my ability to make good art and not wake up reading the Showbiz column. So that's a closing recommendation.
Mate, I love that. Well, I, for one, I'm going to be getting up tomorrow morning with a new lease of life. So just one more time, thank you so much. Episode number 4 of COVID Talk with Gareth Emery, absolute legend, and we're very keen to see what's going to be coming of the next few years, mate. And have a good one, yeah?
Thanks so much, Mark. Cheers.
Perfect.